Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Welcome to DCC Shop. In this episode, I'm going to finish installing DCC and sound into my two HO scale Southern Pacific GP40P-2s. So in the last several episodes, I've been installing DCC and lighting into these engines and also sound. And I've gotten the class lights done, the number boards are done, and the oscillating lights are done. But I haven't yet done the headlights or the emergency lights, so that'll be next. And that'll pretty much wrap it up, and hopefully we'll get these things put back together this time around. In a lot of my builds, I like to just use fiber optic strands and use a 3mm LED inside the shell somewhere, which is what I'm doing with the oscillating light. However, the headlights suffer from clearance issues on both ends. This is just, there's not a lot of room in the front here because you got the cab and you've got this piece of metal here, and there's just a lot of stuff in here. So I'm going to use surface mount LEDs, kind of like I did with the class lights. And similarly in the back, you've got this big speaker thing. In some of my own builds, I actually build a plastic enclosure and run the fiber optics through it. But that's not really an option with this one, so I'm going to use surface mount LEDs back here just because it's kind of short. So the procedure is going to be similar to what I did for the class lights, building some styrene supports and putting the surface mount LEDs in those, and then running very short pieces of fiber optic to the lenses. So as I talked about when I did the class lights, it's important for the ends of the fiber optic strands to be securely supported so that they don't wiggle around. Especially with the headlights, you want them to stay pointing down the track and not up or down or to the side or something. So having a little bit of support in there is important. So to do that, what I like to do is to add some thickness to the shell, because the shell is not all that thick. To do that, I'm going to glue a couple pieces of 40,000 styrene inside the shell. I cut these big enough to come down past the headlight and still reach the roof, and then they're thin enough to fit between the class light mounts that I made earlier. If anyone's curious, this piece is about 2 by 4 scale feet, but the exact dimensions don't really matter. It just has to fit inside the shell. I cut 2 pieces and I'll laminate them together with some liquid styrene cement. This is Micromark, same stuff, but any plastic weld kind of cement would work here. Sorry that this is a little hard to see. I took those 2 pieces that I laminated and glued them inside the shell behind the headlight. I found these cool 1/16 drill bits at the hardware store, and they're set up for a hex drive, which is kind of nice. You can use these with a power tool, of course, but if you're going to use them just to drill through plastic with your fingers, it gives you a lot better leverage than just trying to use a regular drill bit. I'm keeping one finger on the back of that plastic that I just glued in so that I don't push it out by accident. And I'm just going to very carefully drill a 1/16 hole through the whole thing. So I could use a tool for this and get this done a lot faster, but I kind of prefer the control and precision you get when you're doing it by hand like this. I know I'm not going to melt anything, and I'm also much less at risk of damaging the model. Another reason I like to do it by hand is because I want to make sure that the drill is going through straight, so that it's straight when viewed from the side and also straight from top down. That way the headlight will be straight. Now I need to cut a couple short lengths of 1/16 aluminum tubing. And how short? Well, they need to be short enough to fit in the headlight hole that I just drilled without sticking out either end. So these are maybe just a little shy of 1/4 of an inch, or about 15 to 18 inches in HO scale. Again, the exact measurement doesn't matter, but this should be long enough to provide some adequate support for the fiber optic. I'm using my drill bit to countersink one end to make it look like a reflector. So if you can see that the end is slightly concave now, that'll look really good with the fiber optic lens. So if it's a little rough, I will clean up the inside end that goes inside the model with a file, just to remove any flash that's left over from sawing it. It's a good idea to test fit them first before you glue them. These ended up just slightly too long, so I'm going to file them a little shorter. I'm filing the inside end, by the way, so I don't have to re-bevel them again. Before I insert the aluminum, I use a little bit of matte medium as an adhesive, just stick some in there before I push the aluminum through. Now I can push the tubing into the headlight casting. I'll use my drill bit just to recess it slightly. Hopefully this shows up on camera, but the aluminum tubing is recessed just a little bit into the headlight casting, and that's to allow space for the lens. The idea is the lens shouldn't stick out too far from the casting. It should look like a real train headlight where the glass just bulges slightly. That's what I'm after. So you need a little space to allow for that. For the next step, I've cut some more pieces of plastic. These are also approximately 2 by 4 scale feet, and this is 40 thousandths styrene. And this is going to be to hold the actual LEDs. I'm holding one of those pieces of plastic that I cut with my finger inside the model, and then I'm going to drill into it with a number 68 drill bit. And this is just to put a little dimple in it. I'm not trying to drill through and drill my finger, but I just want to make sure that I get the spacing of the holes correct. So now I have a piece of plastic with 2 holes started. They're not quite centered, but that won't matter because no one's going to see this. I can finish drilling them outside of the model where I'm less likely to drill into my finger. I put a second piece of plastic underneath the one that I just drilled out, and now in turn I'm using that as a pattern to drill holes in the second piece. Now I'm using my 1/16 bit to enlarge the holes in that second piece. Now I'm using the second piece just to dimple a third piece. Now that I've dimpled the third piece, I'm using a larger drill bit. I'm not sure the exact size of this. It's probably about 3/16 or so. Doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to make a little pocket so that the LEDs will fit inside here. The idea is to sandwich the LEDs into this whole thing. This is the second or middle piece, and I used a file to score some grooves in it to make space for the wires. This is the part that's actually going to hold the LEDs. So I want to make sure that the wires have somewhere to go. This is the middle piece with the 2 LEDs in it. These are the 603 size warm white LEDs from Eve model that I've been using for other parts of this build. I was originally going to run 1 wire to each side, but it actually was easier to put it together with just the wires coming off to one side. Now I'll take the piece with the dimples on it and use it to sandwich this on the back. I'm going to glue this off camera because it's just too fussy, but the idea is to sandwich the LEDs between the 2 pieces of plastic to hold them firmly in place. Alright, so here's the finished light assembly. The small holes are on the first layer, and those are going to hold the ends of the fiber optics. The reason I'm doing it this way, this is kind of my old method, and I went to a different method with the class lights, and I found it really hard to get the alignment right. So having the holes here will ensure that the fiber optics will line up properly with the LEDs. And then the rest of it is just a sandwich to hold the LEDs in place inside there. Of course, it's always a good idea to make sure it works. I've got it hooked up to my test battery, and this is looking really good. I twisted the positive leads together and soldered them, and then this will eventually solder to the blue wire from the decoder. And then the negative leads come over here, and there's a 1K ohm resistor on each one, and I twisted the resistors together before soldering 1 resistor to each wire. The rule of thumb generally is 1 resistor per LED, and I follow that because sometimes if I don't, the brightness of the LEDs doesn't match. If you try to use 1 LED or 1 resistor for both LEDs, sometimes it ends up acting a little strange. So just doing this works great. So just to recap, I like to use a lighter to melt a lens onto the end of the fiber optic. I've covered this before in previous videos, but one thing I didn't cover was if you're having trouble getting the lens to be aligned properly, sometimes a little piece of aluminum tubing over the end that I've dimpled with a drill bit to make it look like a reflector, just like I put in the model, will help to hold the shape of it while it's heating. Another thing I did in a previous video was to paint the backs of some of the fiber optics that I'd prepared with lenses silver, and that's to mimic a reflector. However, I don't really need that with the aluminum tubing, which pretty much is the reflector, so I can go ahead and use clear ones in the headlights. Alright, this might be a little hard to see what I'm doing, but I've taken one of the fiber optic strands and I put it through the lens, and then I'm inside where you can't see, I'm threading it into one of the holes in the light that I made, and then with it on, of course, so I can see what I'm doing, I'm pushing this, the light mount to the where it's going to end up being, and having the fiber optics in there ensures that when I glue it, it'll stay in the proper place, which I was having a little trouble with the class lights. So trying to get both of them lined up. It can be a little difficult to do on camera, but that's the general procedure. You can see this one's looking good. I got to get the other one lined up. All right, it's still a little bit fussy, but it took a lot less time to get the lights lined up, and they're looking pretty bright. I like that. The next step is to cut the fiber optics short enough to fit. It took a little bit of trial and error to get the length right. I'll put just a small dab of canopy glue on the shaft of the fiber optic and then push it into place. And that should keep it from falling out. And that's pretty much it for the rear headlight. It's looking pretty good. Now I'll deal with the front headlight and the UDE, or emergency light. I always wondered about the UDE name. It stands for undesired emergency, apparently. But is there such a thing as a desired emergency? Like I did in the back, I put some aluminum tubing inside the headlight casting. And then I also removed the non-working light that was in the UDE. And I need to drill a hole in that because I can't use aluminum tubing in this. So I already did this off camera, but I used a number 68 drill bit. And the trick to this here is to drill at a slight down angle so that the drill bit ends up inside the short hood. Because if you just drill straight back, there's a possibility that it could end up in the plastic at the top here, or even, push through the top of the shell, which wouldn't be so great. So, just having it ever so slightly angled downward, make sure that the path for the fiber optic will end up inside the hood. Just like I did in the back, I laminated some pieces of styrene together to make a holder for the LEDs. The main difference with this one is that the pieces are just a little bit smaller, and I put 3 LEDs in it instead of 2. So the headlights are on the outside and the UDE light is in the middle. And the idea here is that this is going to be mounted back a little bit from the actual headlight lenses, and I'm going to take advantage of the flexibility of fiber optics to route the light to the lenses. Another difference is that I use 2 layers instead of 1 for the smaller holes, so that the fiber optic strand has more support on this end to keep it, pointing straight at the LED rather than potentially moving around. Just like I did in the back, I have 2 1K ohm resistors for the headlights that are ganged together, and the white wire will attach here. And then I have a single resistor for the UDE, and I'll attach a function lead to this end that'll go to the actual decoder. This is what it looks like hooked up to the test battery. Looks good. So now it's just a matter of installing this into the model and routing the fiber optics. For the emergency light, I'm going to use one of the lenses that I made that has the silver on the back, since there's no aluminum tubing on that one. And I'm going to take some Tamiya clear red and coat the front. This is the paint here. It's Tamiya X27 clear red. And it dries transparent, so it works really well if you need a colored lens. And what I like about it is on the end of a fiber optic strand, the overall appearance that you end up with is pretty similar to the dummy lens that was on the engine to begin with. So it's a good replacement. This is what it looks like with the lights mounted inside the locomotive. This is the holder that I made, and then hopefully you can see these. There's the fiber optic strands. The middle one goes to the UDE emergency light, and the 2 outside ones go to the headlight. So I'm pretty happy with the way the headlight looks when I hook it up to my test battery. And the emergency light works too. It actually looks a little more red in person, I think, than it does on video for some reason. One of the more challenging things was to route all the wires through the space in the cab floor where the original wires went through. I did manage to do it, but it took a little while to fish them all through there. I also wired resistors and leads to all of the wires that didn't already have that on it. And I followed the DCC conventions as best I could, although they don't really have anything standard above the headlights. I think green is for F1, but anything beyond that is kind of whatever you want. And I usually have more colors of wire than this, but for some reason I must be running low. I need to order some more. So I ended up just using green and brown for all of the extra stuff, like the class lights and the number boards and the emergency light. And then, of course, white for the front headlight and yellow for the rear headlight. The 3mm LED for the oscillating light is shrouded in some heat shrink tubing. And there's some heat shrink tubing to gang together the 2 fiber optic strands from that light. And it'll be just up here. I have it taped inside the shell. And I also modified the shell just slightly. I added a piece of black plastic under the exhaust opening just to prevent any possible light leaks in case this LED shines out the back of the heat shrink tubing or something like that. So I'm really glad that Loksound includes these drawings with the decoders. This is the one I'm using, and this is actually larger than the actual decoder, so it's really helpful to determine where to put all the wires, because this thing has a lot of solder pads and they're all kind of close together. So and it's really hard to read on the decoder itself because the writing is so small. So I really like having this chart to go by. I've gone ahead and soldered all the wires to the decoder. I've used aux 1 through 5 on the decoder, these solder pads here, for all of the extra lights, number boards, oscillating light, the emergency light, and then class lights. And then the headlight connects over here, the rear headlight over here, and then the blue wires. There's 2 different solder pads you can use for the blue common here, so one is from the rear and one's from the front. So it looks a little bit like a mess, and getting all these wires back into the shell might be a little bit of a challenge, but before I do that, I want to go test this thing on my Loc programmer and make sure that it actually works. Alright, I got both engines back together. If you've been following the series, you know that I did 3199 at the same time. It's essentially the same. The main difference is the speaker. 3197 was originally a factory sound equipped unit, so it has the stock factory speaker. 3199 has a Loksound speaker in it. Otherwise, it's the same decoder, same everything pretty much. So I'm glad to have them back together. So I'm not going to get down in the weeds with all the programming on the Loc programmer in this video. However, I did set up the engine so that the function key assignments more or less follow the standard. In fact, I have a standard, but I actually changed it during this build because I realized that for a lot of the locomotives I've reviewed recently, there's kind of an emerging standard with certain function keys being assigned for certain things across different brands, like F6 is typically ditch lights, F9 is the drive hold for Loksound equipped engines, F10 is brake, and so on. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I'm thinking if I ever have guest operators, it would be more convenient if I kind of followed that myself. So I redid my standards yet again, and I'm going to implement them starting with these locomotives. So I think that'll be a help in the future. I didn't do too much other programming except to pick an Athearn P3 horn sound, which I think is probably the most appropriate for these locomotives. I basically did the same setup for 3197 and 3199. And the only thing I ran into is that I was getting some weirdness with some of the lights going on and off at random. And I dug into it, and I found in the programmer, in the Loc programmer, that there are random functions, or a random setting that turns on and off certain functions. So I disabled all of those because until I can figure out more what they're about, I would rather not have lights come on that I didn't want to have come on. So if you're using the Loc programmer and you've got anything like that, you might want to check out these settings because they can cause some weirdness. I don't know what the equivalent CVs would be. I would highly recommend, if you're doing Loksound, to get a Loc programmer. It's just so much easier. They are kind of hard to program just by using CVs. Since they do have different speakers, I thought it would be interesting to take a listen. I'm not sure how well it'll translate on video, but I'm going to try it anyway. To my ear, 3199 sounds a little better. It has more volume and also better tone. It's more rounded and less tinny. So I think the Loksound speaker is definitely superior to the stock speaker, although the stock speaker is not bad either. So I may replace the one in 3197 eventually, but for now it's fine. Eventually I'll probably want to do some cosmetic things like weathering to these engines, but for now they're finished and they are functional, which is good. So this gets a couple engines out of my project pile and into the more or less done pile, which makes me happy. And that's going to do it for this time. I'm really happy with the way these locomotives turned out. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.